on Building in Public with Rajat today from Ayurkula. Did I say that right?
Yes, you did.
Okay, great. Welcome. So we were just about to dive into the little catch-up talk of where we are. So I am in San Francisco still, and still kind of planning a little escape. So I think we're going to end up we'll be in the middle of California for Memorial Day weekend, and then we'll be in Mammoth for at least the beginning, but maybe much of the summer.
Very interesting. Good plans you've got over there.
Yeah. How about you? Are you sticking local, or are you going to be moving around at all?
I'm just missing Hawaii right now.
I know, right? We all are.
Yeah. Yeah, it was so nice to see them all.
Yeah.
In Maui.
Did you? Oh, right. You were just in Maui, right?
Yes.
And, okay.
And so I spend all my day every day thinking, what am I doing over here?
Yeah.
Go to God's country and be there.
Right. What was the Maui experience that was most memorable for you?
That's an interesting question. I think it wasn't that one thing. It is that you could do what you want. I mean, I think it's just that, like something like what you say about New York, in a metallic, concrete way. If I were to say now,
right.
You could say the same about Maui or Hawaii in the green way of saying it. And so you can pick your elixir or poison. So this was just everything. In fact, if there was one thing, it was the papaya. Papayas were
fantastic.
I don't know. Simply, I never had those ever. Those kinds.
Right. Did you put lime on it?
No, I missed that.
Oh, that is the thing. So
that's years how ago, I've had it. I think we did, right?
No, we didn't. I actually even went to Paya because I believe there was somebody from Highlighter who used to live there, and I thought there would be some queues over there. I didn't find any queues.
Yeah, but wait, would you do papaya, lime, and then did you put anything else on it?
I mean, I guess sometimes salt, but we had this one. We had this one when I had spent some time. I had a friend who had a place on the Big Island, so we used to spend time. He would be there months at a time. I would visit for a while, and so he kind of knew like the local people and the farmers markets and stuff. So there's this one farmers market we would go, and whenever we would buy the papaya, the guy would say, "You got to buy limes, double the flavor." So we used to just call limes flavor doublers. Like, hey, do we have any flavor doublers around?
Awesome.
We have to do it in New Jersey because you want to camouflage the yuckiness of the papaya. I didn't feel the urge to do anything. It was just
perfect.
As is. And did you go? I think you did the road to Hana, right?
Yeah, on the first day, and I had somebody in the back seat who advised.
No, that was something else. So the first drive we took, on the west side, like that really sketchy highway.
Oh yeah.
If you're going the loop this way.
Yeah.
We would end up just like driving that as a loop, and some people were very nervous on that drive.
Yeah.
But then we did the road to Hana afterwards.
Yeah, it was beyond the blowhole, and we kept going. And somebody in the back seat said, "Yeah, just go around the bend." I said, "Fine." And then it went on, and it became a single lane, and it became a lane which wouldn't take all the wheels were not really on lanes. Right. And then we stopped by, asked a local, and he looked at us like, "What are you doing over here?" Kinds,
Right.
He says, "Okay, now you keep going, and there'll be a couple of peaks and a couple of valleys, and you keep going." And then I said, "Okay."
Did you go to isn't there a famous banana bread shop up there?
Yeah, we went there. Yeah.
There are plenty of there. Actually, there's more than one.
Sandy's or something. Sandy's or something it was called.
Yeah, there was one. What you're talking about? Yeah, there was one that I knew of was kind of famous. And so you went around the north side from you went around and kind of rejoined civilization around like Lahaina
Yes. And that was my trial by fire, where they said, "Oh, well, if you go there, then it's whatever the fifth most deadliest road, or you're in for divorce, and all those nice things." I said, "Okay." It's like,
well, so there's a worse drive if you want, and I say that jokingly.
Is that the backside?
Yeah. Did you do the south?
Do that.
Okay, no, it's illegal. So you're on the record, so you don't want to say that you ever did this because you can't. At least if you have a rental car, it violates the terms of the rental.
Actually.
Oh, okay.
So is it dangerous, or is it simply that it goes into muck and it's not built road?
Well, it's fun. I've done it a few times, and it's never felt dangerous. But when it's raining hard, and you can be close to the ocean, and also, kind of the roads can get a little washed out because there's big kind of gullies that grab water and push it out. And you're right next to the road with, possibly a flood going.
Okay.
So I've never felt like it was really risky, but I have been there in the rains where it felt like, oh, if this were much worse, you could imagine not wanting to be here. And there's no services, nobody's going to come out and help you out. You're really out on your own. And also the road quality is very, very bad. So you're just bumping around, huge boulders just sitting in the middle of the road. You have to drive around. It's kind of, a little bit of it's very wild, which is fun, but it's also very wild, which,
yeah,
you got to be ready for that. Yeah.
Yeah.
How many years did you spend over there?
I never was there for any kind of permanent extended stay. I guess in all I've been, for probably months total, but not years. But a few weeks here and there, a month here and there, but not kind of one, not like a 1 year period at any given point in time.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to you guys setting up a headquarters. And
I know, right?
Highlighter Hawaii.
That's right. That'd be great.
Yeah.
I love on the Big Island. There's this amazing place to swim at the pier, and you're right off the beach, and then all of a sudden there's all kinds of sea life that you can see, and just buoys that help you sort of guide your path, and it's really a beautiful place and very accessible, and kind of easy to get to and use, but it's also kind of tons of natural beauty, and so that's one of my favorite spots overall in Hawaii.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So cool. So I was just thinking to maybe one of the last times that you visited us, which was maybe one of the first test sessions that we ever ran.
Oh yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Was that our October Bootacular?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so. I was sitting in Colorado. It was like the old UI.
Yeah.
Very boxes everywhere.
I was about to say that you can just see right off the bat that it looks so much smoother. Mm-hmm. And I'm not finding anything to test right here. It looks really cool.
Yeah.
Very well laid out.
People have been working very hard on getting all the details right. So we really split the details, and I think it's come a long way since October. So hopefully no crashes for you today.
Yep.
I think we had all kinds of problems before.
Yeah.
So I think so back when you came on first with the Bootacular, it was really just playing around and testing things. And then over the time, we've been running these shows that we were calling Lunch Break, which was kind of us hanging out, kind of figuring out how we want to use the tool. And then we've gotten a little more focused recently with what we call Building in Public. And so the purpose of Building in Public is really for us to kind of meet people who are building something new in the world. It could be at any stage and any type of thing, and just try to sort of we like to talk and understand the process and sort of what brought you to build this thing, and sort of what inspires and motivates you, and kind of where it is in kind of development or growth, and kind of what it hopes to be. And so all of those are kind of the context for the open discussion that we like to have here. So I just wanted to sort of welcome you on, and let's get down to it. So So what's the what's the backstory on Ayurkula?
Well, the backstory was Rajat 1.101 of the first version of Rajat, which was mostly in finance, pretty much entirely in finance. And so I spent a bunch of time in different facets of finance across India and in the US, across different kinds of institutions, investors and rating agencies and investment banks. And So Ayurkula was always something that was germinating as per se. So I always had that interest about trying to connect the dots between, what makes us healthy. And more initially, it's more narcissistic, right? You just want to be healthy yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And so you try and see what works. And so I was busy. I always had that inclination trying to connect the dots, and always had a somewhat reluctance to really go to the doctor ever. And I've been lucky. But it just kept building on. And then initially we had some episodes close in the family, including my mother, who was down with cancer. And there's little I knew at that point of time that could be of help. She succumbed to it. She fought, she succumbed. And then the story continued as we came into the US. It was still the back burner. And then at some point after the meltdown, subprime meltdown, as it's known, or it was, I don't know.
Yeah.
Subprime is not even a word now.
Right. It was like 2008 era kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so at that point, I started digging more into connecting the dots formally by actually educating myself into, what is known as modern nutrition and science and all the things about epigenetics and whatever else. And lo and behold, we had another instance in our own family where somebody was struck with cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And this time around, sort of, I was better prepared in terms of adjuvant help that you may give. And then, the C word is not difficult to find. It hits people all across. So it was families and friends and lots of people. And it's just not cancer per se, but autoimmune. It could be either overexpressive or underexpressive. So when it's underexpressive, you get cancer. When you're overexpressive autoimmune, then you get rheumatoid or other kinds of things. And then a whole gamut of things follow. Mm-hmm. And it was very interesting that, all this is just in the background, right? Without any idea of trying to really build something. Mm-hmm. And so without going for N is equal to 10,000 double placebo blind test and trying to say, well, this is true, in that formulaic way, you did see that things work. There was a lot of low-hanging fruit where people would make changes and you would see that there were improvements, a lot of times dramatic. And so that was the background, kept, moving along. And at some point now in life, this happened all coterminous with slightly before COVID really hit. It was this whole question about me and my life as to that whole concept of how much of control and how much of demand do you want in a job, right? Mm. So I want the demand to be a big factor where there's a creative demand and not the demand to just plug numbers. Mm-hmm. And you also want some degree of control as to what the output is going to be in terms of, where it leads to. Mm-hmm. And so whatever I would think would be the next gig or thing to do, you'd always feel that I would try and project myself, I can do this, but then would I be happy 6 months down the line? The answer always, it would be no. Mm. And so that was a kind of a process that kept going on. And so, I said, okay, let's try to formulate something. And this was actually also riding on the back of, we may have discussed. So I tried my hands at, building a social media platform called the Hub Mob. At that point, maybe it was the wrong thing and the right thing at the wrong time. So community building. So there was a lot of experience. And like you say, it's to create a product, it's extremely difficult in terms of the minutia, and there's something that goes wrong and it's a lot of time. And every time there's one change, the amount of downstream variables that could be impacted in terms of the devices or whatever else becomes infinite.
Right.
So I had that on my back where we worked with a cross-country team across India and Middle East and, lots of folks. And a lot of times it was very frustrating. We did build up an audience, which came to about maybe 2,000 people or something. But it was all sporadic and it really didn't, go the way I wanted it to go. So we thought of germinating it, getting all the thought leaders. It never came about. And so this time around with Ayurkula, I thought maybe one should not fret about the technology part of it. Because if you were to see, look at things, and there are all the tools in the world to deliver thought, engage people, and there you can get them off the bat. And rather than fret the details and build something and then look for people, start the other way around, where you build a community.
Yep.
And then if there is need, to build a kind of a ecosystem, so be it. And that's a good problem to have. And so that's the genesis of Ayurkula. That was the, structure part of it. And what we're trying to accomplish, obviously, is, where, as I said, low-hanging fruit leads to a lot of change in health. And especially the kind of times we are in, the devastating impact that we are continuing to see, where you may have not just the version 1, but iteration 2, 3, and 4, and then so can you get groups of people who work together and communicate and bring all nuggets of wisdom, and so we sort of been over the past year and a half, maybe more, just about that time, formally have been holding sessions on Ayurkula where we sort of gradually built up an audience which was quite global. And it went all the way, folks from Colorado down to New Zealand. And
how does that process, can we go from there's 0 people in this audience to there's 10 to there's 100? What did those very first moments look like? Were you creating content? Were you reaching out to people you knew? How did that look?
So that is an interesting question, actually. So there was a lot of thought process and a lot of content itself in my mind in terms of my readings and formal readings into ancient texts of Ayurveda and other knowledge systems, whether it's traditional Chinese medicine or the Japanese system in the Middle East. They had a lot of good, and even in Europe, where there's a lot of integrative medicine. It's not just a fashionable name like goat yoga. It's more than that. But I was never forced to create a formulaic way of delivering it. So it was sort of, I ended up announcing, okay, we have a session on the coming Sunday. And then I was forced to actually literally off the bat spend, and that was fun to create pressure on yourself. So the demand element, I controlled the demand, and I could, then with force of the demand, there was output. And so every time the session was announced, so we ranged from all the way for example, we discussed things about the gut, we discussed the mind, we had people on board, neuroscientists who came in and also discussed things mind and how you change habits and what it makes. So you don't go.
And what is this? I just want to get into the very starting point. What does this first session look like? Are you in person? Are you in a virtual space? How did it look?
It was all virtual in the Ayurkula format. And the physical part was obviously prior to that, where before we were hit with COVID. So it was virtual. And let's say the first session, it is basically the approach. What's different about Ayurkula, right? So what you're trying to do here is trying to bridge the gap between folks who don't really have an acute issue and need immediate help, but have endemic systemic issues, which is the global pipeline of health or ill health, right?
Right.
And that is what we are faced with. That is an existing problem that a lot of people have been trying to crack. And the other end, you have the providers, which are the doctors and the faith healers and the goat yoga and whatever else, right? And how do these two folks know and connect where you do the right thing? And sometimes you may not need to have the need to go to a specialist, where you actually, in a community format, can do things which you are doing to remove your own system from what's not homeostasis, but homeodynamics. That's the way Ayurveda looks at it, because your body is constantly changing, and then it's changing as we grow up, as we grow old, and in the seasons, during the course of the day. and all this thing is now weighted by science. It's circadian rhythms, and there's a Nobel Prize on that. So you bring it all together, and you try and tell people, well, short of, you see there's a cliff edge, right? So the problem, which continues to exist today, even now with me in delivery, is that, when somebody sees a red light, they are very open to change of things which are, very mundane. But when it is short of that, then folks would look for a magical solution. It could be an extract of turmeric, and it could be the goat yoga or something else, whatever else.
Right.
And if you were to just talk some plain, English or whatever else, it does not sink in. And so how do you motivate people where they obviously know something is wrong, but you're avoiding the discussion by trying to lunge on to that magical thing that's being pawned off by somebody somewhere on the internet?
Yeah, well, that's where, from my perspective, so just to make it a little more concrete also, I mean, it literally started with these Zoom sessions that were, shockingly well attended, in my opinion, and, shocking amount of engagement from these people, and a Slack group. So it sort of reminded me, almost of, a health Renko, in a sense, because there were all these people from all over the place coming together. And even though I think what you're saying is that it's very hard for people who don't literally have a diagnosis of diabetes or cancer or something to start working on their health and start thinking about should I start doing breathing practice and alter the ingredients I'm using in my cooking or whatever, some of these low-hanging fruit things you're talking about. There are still enough people who, I mean, unfortunately have been diagnosed with those things or have family members who are going through that, or they're obese and they want to change. There's a lot of lifestyle disease that exists, I think, and in the community that I saw, I think most people who came on, they would have older parents who were struggling with something, or they themselves were. So it was interesting because I think it started off with almost a lecture, almost a seminar series format where you obviously have so much knowledge that you would share with this audience, and then there would be a lot of discussion afterwards, and then the Slack group would continue to have discussion where people were has anyone dealt with this? What did you do? Or what's a good recipe for this? Whatever. And that was growing and growing and growing. I think there was just word of mouth. People would invite other people. But I think one problem that you were facing is that it was a lot of work to keep producing this stuff. And then also thinking about what kind of content should live on after the fact, and how much should you make public and how much should be proprietary, and basically how do you nurture this community, and what are even ways that it could start to monetize in the future? Should it be classes that you charge people to do deep dives with you on, or should it be a retreat, or should it be some sort of subscription community? So I think those are all super tricky open questions, but
yeah,
it was a really powerful starting point.
Right. And that continues to be a challenge. And obviously, you hit the nail there, because there is this good karma part of it, because at the end of it, what drove me to do it, even before Ayurkula was there, we were doing it just pro bono, and even now for most part of it. So, it makes a good tombstone. Right? What is the purpose of what you're doing right now? And that's very critical. So that is where the control and demand thing comes in, where you wanted to control as to what you have a control on what you're doing. Having said that, how do you also ensure that this is something that sustains itself? And given that if you are trying emphatically to build a platform which is based on authenticity, and you are a stickler on that, where you don't want to also start selling magic cookies, right? And so you have lots of these not startups or entities which have bundled solutions where there are products also, not bringing a product per se. You tap on the back, you attend a session, you buy this. So if you want to keep it authentic and free from conflict, and at the same time make the person realize there is a value proposition to their health,
right?
That's the thing to crack. So right now, what at Ayurkula I'm doing is that while I'm doing these free sessions at public libraries and also periodic sessions, which we started off every week now with reduced frequency, but on topics, specific topics, one of which we are going to hold. I'll expand on it later. And so bringing these folks in, that's the element where, you go out to a larger audience. And a very small audience is where the paid element comes in, where people have said, oh, you know what, I want to work on this. And sometimes folks have joined with their entire families, their children, husband and wife, and sometimes they're just individuals themselves. And one of the reasons why there is a necessity, not just a capitalist drive to actually, look for that conversion of like building up something and removing negative carry. It is when you put in moolah, there is a commitment from both sides. And just like if for a person who's not seeing the red light of an acute disease, if somebody puts in a stake at it, then you are more eagerly listening rather than just listening to the talk show.
Yeah, it's like a stronger commitment to the process.
Right. And because it means something for you, and you want something in exchange, which is fine. It is great. And so that if it spurs that commitment, that's my biggest victory, because that money exchange that happens is is just a process of whatever it is.
So in a sense, like the philosophy is you show up and you create value for people, and you create content, and you create it in a way that you can be sure that you're not creating a conflict of interest or kind of pushing products that are not necessarily consistent with what you're trying to do. And then you sort of are letting people, you're sort of creating new opportunities where people can get deeper with you or the content. And so does that look something like a new type of content, or is that like one-on-one work sessions or coaching, or what are the kind of forms that those sort of healthy dovetails take?
Yeah, so it actually follows that format loosely. So what we do is that we do joint sessions virtually as of now. And that's a good way of sort of leveraging out your reach. And so we do these joint sessions, which are also including one-on-one sessions as well, because a lot of questions follow from a big discussion in itself on a topic. And then there could be a derivative discussion, which happens one-on-one with the person. So, it's like pretty much going to school, as there's a session, there are things to do, there are activities to do, and we on Slack, we have created some channels. So each group or cohort has a channel. And then within that, you also have 3 breakups. At Ayurkula, we look at health in a triadic structure. So you look at it as a function of happiness is constituted by happy mind, happy nutrition, and happy elimination, right? So those are the 3 things. And all those 3 are addressed. So we have channels which relate to the mind, disease, and body. And then we also have a channel which dedicates itself to how you execute in terms of recipes. And each of these could take many, many paths, and when you want to complicate it, but that's how the template is set up.
So mind, nutrition, and elimination.
So that is the way I formulate my sessions that we hold, the joint sessions. And from those in the Slack channel, we've built up channels where we have we discuss topics related to disease in one place, related to mind, breath, meditation, whatever else, including neuro issues, and we sometimes bring in experts. And then obviously the recipe part is what gets people into trouble, day in and out, which you want to ignore. So because more often than not, the issue is, a person wants to be told, I just give me this thing to do so that I can see why. So kind of a reductionism. And so a lot of value can be attributed, or a story can be built around an attribution, which is reductionist, right? A leads to B. But unfortunately, nutrition remains the most controversial topic around mankind, even now with what's happening. And so in reality, the solution is not A leads to B. You got to change the whole thing. And so the answer is always it depends. And that is the challenge where you try and bring the community together, and one person spurs the other one to act. And hopefully there is enough momentum you build up where people see that, this is, they introspect and think, well, this is something I need to do, and they would change those habits which are wrong day in and out.
So are there certain types of habits that seem to be the typical ones that people are trying to break, or that they're sort of trying to get out of some well-worn paths? So I don't know if maybe typical things like smoking or eating sugar, or if there are sort of categories, or if there are kind of new things. What forms do those usually take?
So luckily I have not, for people's benefit, I haven't encountered too many smokers. But yes, so sugar, absolutely. And sugar in Ayurveda is, you have all the concept of 6 tastes. I mean, so in Ayurveda, you don't look at constitution of the food in terms of proteins, fats, and carbs, and sugar is actually a carb. And in Ayurveda, sugar forms a sweet taste, and the sweet is also under the big umbrella of carbs. So carbs, like all kind of carbs, are actually fall under sweet taste in Ayurveda. And excess.
Can you just overview the 6 tastes? Because I'm not familiar with that.
So you have sugar.
By the way, you can screen share anything you want in case you have anything, but you don't have to.
Yeah, I'll screen share. Actually, I'll do that. 1 sec. Let me see.
Here, I'll set you up. There, you should see the screen share enabled in your controls at the bottom now.
Okay, I see that. So basically what happens in Ayurveda is that you have these 6 tastes, sweet, salt, pungent, astringent. And what you do is that since it's based on this concept of balancing everything, anything in excess, or ati as it's known, is what leads to the change of the body state from its initial state to its state which is disturbed. And so sugar, as you mentioned, is one of the obvious culprits. So if you were to look at it in a lingo that we can understand, so yes, sugar as in all of carbs and all the other, when you start going down that path, and obviously talk of refined carbs and things like that. And then generally the elephant in the room is obviously alcohol as well. And the other issue is that the whole food pyramid that is addressed by, nutrition, and there's a lot of controversy around what the right pyramid should be. And a lot of argument, it should be inverted. And so the natural blame is laid on sugars. It's taken away from sugars, but it's, people would like to put it on fat. And well, there's been a lot of fight about trying to, limit the amount of sugar and whatever else, but it's a losing battle. And so obviously, you can discuss the same thing in many worldviews, but at the back end of it, and sometimes, when people who are not ethnic, who've not encountered Ayurveda, you would think of it as an arcane thing with a lot of complication. But in a very simplified manner, what it says is that we are born with a certain kind of a constitution, and that's our genotype, right? And that would be our prakriti. And then obviously you build on that the way you live your life with epigenetics, right? And so we transition, and as we grow, so since the body is in a dynamic equilibrium, you move from that initial state and it keeps changing. So when we are young, there's excess of kapha, which is also built up by a lot of sugar. So when we were young, and if you go to using a systems model as we use in Ayurkula, saying that there's no A leads to B, but there are a lot of things conniving to create a system. So you would have changed everything to change the system. And so I call our belly the tub, right? The tub gets filled up. There's a flow model, and it gets filled up by whatever we are doing. And at a stage in life when we are young, sugar and carbs or whatever don't matter because the tub is slowly getting filled. And at that point, actually, the body needs to accumulate. And sugar is an accumulator in Ayurveda. It accumulates. You accumulate. You build up body fat. You build up your bone mass, and then at some point, actually, there is that bulge, and then there is obviously college and things. Think there are other elements that get added to that, and then that bulge is what keeps building up, and it's still a very slowly building up problem where it doesn't become acute. So you're looking at a phase where people go from the 20s to the 30s, 40s, and 50s, and the thing keeps building up unless the body. So there is this famous oncologist, I believe, in the Columbia University, and she wrote this book. I think The First Cell or The Last Cell, The First Cell, about cancer. So like the body is able to maintain its state of when you go to an annual blood exam, you get reports, and there's a wide range between your metrics on the blood picture. And you would find that the body struggles and keeps trying to bring you back into balance. It fights its good battle. And at some point, then like in a system, it goes broke. And then you have a dreaded disease of whatever kind. And of course, the 5 leading diseases are there for everyone. You have all the autoimmunes, and you have the cardio diseases and diabetes and everything else. And at that point, what people are looking for is a solution, either from a pill, a statin, or now it's very interesting where you have these startups where you have a glucose sensor patch. And actually, at Ayurkula also we've had people, and not sponsored, obviously we cannot afford glucose sensors, but to test what we were saying, whether it works or not, people actually put on glucose sensors, and they had really good results. But the point is that it may be your Fitbit or the glucose sensor which tells you, well, okay, this makes sense. And so we have forgotten to listen to our own body. Fine, if it takes a Fitbit or a smartwatch to make you listen to your body, so be it, or a sensor. But that may be the first step. And then,
so would you generally encourage people, if they're excited about kind of exploring these new tools, would you generally encourage people to give it a try just to get them sort of thinking about it or more focused on some of these aspects?
Yes. So the answer is it depends. So if it were a person from a neighborhood which was not, a person could not afford a smartwatch or whatever, or a glucose sensor, right? So, that's not but if there's somebody already wearing one, and that person probably takes more convincing because, it's good for somebody to, because the biggest problem is internalization of the fact that you need to change. And smart folks, they would not listen to doctors or anybody else, but they would listen to data, which is great. And if it sets you down that path, then you are recursively changing something. And, so first you iterate, through many things. Okay, I did this and this happened. I did something else and so happened. So I increased my sour taste and so this happened. So you iterate, and I ate this. So you iterate, and then you recurse. You go into the recursive mode. And so if the initial trigger for a person who was really smart, in whichever, the way we define it, so be it. You look at a sensor, look at data, and convince yourself. And there may be other folks who are, ready to listen to the body. Generally, the body tells you very nicely if you simply stand on a scale, which is not even a smart scale. Your normal scale would do it, and the next morning, obviously, what happened with your digestion. But different strokes for different folks. I think that's the way to answer it.
But in terms of like going back to what you and what we were brainstorming a little bit when you even came to Hawaii and stuff, but just like one of the struggles has sort of been thinking about how to make this sustainable, not only in terms of like your own time investment into it, but keeping the community connected with one another and all of those sorts of things. Like, what has actually felt the most sustainable and what feels the most like acutely unsustainable? And you were like, I think you had a bunch of ideas on, should I write a newsletter? Should I do this? Should I do that? Like, what have you been thinking about that?
So the most unsustainable part was, which is unfortunate, and which I was still would do it even at the cost of my own time, would be where you were helping pro bono people who came down with acute diseases, right? And so there it is not, what is a life worth, right? I mean, so it takes what it takes to help the person get on the feet.
Mm-hmm.
And there is no your time or downtime on that, right? And that really takes up time, a lot of research and connecting the dots, and sometimes making people reach out, connect them with the right people who are actually even engaged in research facilities in hospitals in Ayurveda in India, or even doctors, GPs or whatever, trying to connect people, the right folks, and helping them. And that takes away a lot of time. And can you just say no? You cannot. I mean, when you're faced with somebody who is, coming down with a family member with such an issue, there's no saying no. And there's no price ever that you can attribute to it at that point of time. That's something which is a problem which cannot be solved. I would not like to solve. Obviously, you wouldn't want to say that this is what, you as a shop do. But the bulk of what Ayurkula ought to be doing is to be addressing the belly, literally, is where the whole crisis is. And for example, right now, as it relates to just COVID, and we discussed that, the shots and the double shots and the booster shots, and you have, exponentially declining benefit from these shots as your variant strains, as it happened in flu shots. And so in the end, how would humanity at this point of time address, would we hide behind a mask, or do we really think it's time to pause and change? And so for that, I think on the next weekend, on the 30th, so we are doing an open session where we've tied up with a research institution and funded by some big industrialists in India. The TDU is called a Transdisciplinary University. And so we are doing, open outreach where we have these folks who have been doing clinical work on COVID patients. And management of the disease. So you're not calling it a magical cure. There's nothing, there's no such thing as cure. Every disease is managed. So and management of the disease. So you're not calling it a magical cure. There's nothing, there's no such thing as cure. Every disease is managed. So the body follows equilibrium, and when it goes beyond, then that's a problem. So you've got these people, the doctors, with clinical data. As in, what's the pulse rate, what's the oxygen level, what's the C-reactive protein, so on and so forth. And also, that is what happened when they administered X, Y, and Z herbs and drugs, not formal drugs, Ayurvedic drugs. And so they have this whole thing where it's a small facility, 200-bed hospital, where, maybe so far they have seen, like, there's this one doctor who's, encountered maybe 50 people, and not one of them have really ended up being on, oxygen assist. Mm-hmm. So there's something to say for it. Is it a cure? No. Is it something that is adjuvant that can help people? Absolutely. Is it N is equal to 10,000 double blind placebo study? It isn't. But it would behoove us to sort of include everything in this integrative. So they are, for example, these folks who are working with Ayurvedic herbs are actually at the hospital measuring all the parameters. And if there's ever a case where, your saturation levels fall below a certain limit, you are absolutely sent right away to a facility which would take care of you, with whatever is needed. So, that's the kind of thing that you would do on a global platform. But as it relates to Ayurkula per se, on a paid model, where the belly is trying to address where you have this whole, building epidemic pipeline. Mm-hmm. And if I don't know, I mean, I just, my biggest hope is that all this that's happening around us spurs people to start paying attention to those little small things. Mm-hmm. That can have there's low-hanging fruit. There's a lot of levered impact on that.
Right.
And, when you talk of immunity, it's not built up in a day. There is no magical solution. But if you really change your innate immunity, then there is something that we need to change about the way we live our lives. And that's how you work, when you work, what you eat, what you breathe. And that's not very sexy to sell.
So that you mentioned a lot the belly as kind of the focus. Is when you say the belly, is that a way of talking about nutrition primarily, or any of these pieces that sort of might augment that? Does that all fit under kind of belly as a focus?
I meant belly both figuratively, as in standing in the morning in the shower and trying to look at your toes. And and so if you don't, that is the test that should tell one you should not peep over and look at your toes. And, and if you have to, then it is certainly something that you don't need a doctor to tell you that you go down the wrong path. So that's one. Forget the sensors, forget whatever else, so that's there. And so that also forms the belly in terms of the population, because like we discussed in a systemic approach, in a systems model, where you have a lot of levers of things that are going wrong, the air we breathe, the toxins, the cumulative toxins that we have. So it's not, for example, the way toxins are defined and approved is generally recognized as safe, GRAS, right? So you have, and what are the permissible levels of toxins in a certain thing? But the combined effect, the sigma of all the toxins that we accumulate, is what leads us into problem. So it's the toxins, it's the food, it's the sleep, it's all those things.
Yeah. Wait, can I just pause you for a second?
Sure.
Because I really want to get back to, I think there's obviously so much passion here. So much, people care about it. People want a more holistic approach to their health. Clearly they want someone to tie science and holistic medicine and breathing and meditation and yoga and all of it together. I think there's this is the right time for that too, because it's kind of entering mainstream media more. But what problems are top of mind for you right now as you think about growing this, or even continuing to do it? Because I think it is a struggle to even maintain the kind of community you have. But I mean, there are lots of different avenues you've been thinking of, and I thought it might be helpful. I know we're probably the last bit of the session, but just to brainstorm a little bit on that stuff.
Yeah, that sounds interesting.
So that is actually clear challenge, and it stems from the fact as to the value proposition, where you're defining the value proposition as to it depends on your commitment for change, as opposed to selling a service or a product. For example, even in Ayurveda, you could sell a service as in Panchkarma. That's a cleanse, the deep cleanse, right? So, or a certain kind of fasting where you don't eat for 23 hours and 55 minutes, you eat only for 5 minutes. But on the rest of the time, for the 5 minutes, you just have toxins. So if you are not providing a service which is a solution, and which can be a top dollar solution, you get this done in a facility. One episode in the US can cost you $2,000 to $2,500 or more, whatever, or a product. And what you are saying is that the way is the slow way, a committed way. So what is a price point at which there is commitment, and also enough numbers of people? Because if I were to just work with few people who can benefit and afford to pay, you haven't done something that you're really passionate about doing, which is trying to take it to a larger audience.
But I wonder if is there an in-between, where you could create your sessions and create your content and, kind of continually grow the audience around it and kind of the brand around it, but maybe most of it is free, and it's only kind of some kind of segment, of people who would choose to pay and want to pay, but that kind of makes the whole thing work and hang together and be sustainable, while not trying to kind of have a paid service for everybody, but actually just let the world hear and see and participate with the content you create, while kind of using that as almost like a platform, kind of groundswell platform, to help you find some subset of people who are passionate enough, they want to go deeper, they want to get a service or an app or a food or something that you can also provide.
So here is my existential challenge on this, and that's a very good question. And that is also preventing me from writing too much about things, and also so the one example I could give is, let's say I'm a tennis coach, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if you are teaching somebody tennis, and so in the first instance you would say, I just teach you the forehand and how you take the racket back, right? Mm-hmm. And then you keep doing that, and then you say, we'll come to the end where you would know how to chip and charge and come to the net, right?
Mm-hmm.
But for really building the right athlete, you need to have all the things done at the same time in the systems model, right? So you need to address everything. So what that does is raises the question as to when you do these open sessions, where actually I just find it ethically not good, and I cannot hold myself back and say, I'll be reductionist and I'll talk about the 105 properties of turmeric. And you can actually have all the molecular pathways that can show that turmeric itself can treat almost everything, but it treats nothing because you haven't changed fundamentally. And so do I do a reductionist session open, or even start out putting out things where you just tote one small thing, which is a part of a larger picture, and not the whole thing, which is not doing anybody good? So I don't have a good answer.
So you struggle with the split, like if you did this kind of broad funnel, public media, open content, and then the small deeper dive, you're kind of struggling with what should the focused paid stuff be, like what would people pay and get value out of?
Right.
I also wonder though, if the content, like you mentioned kind of the tennis analogy, I think if I'm new to tennis, I don't know much about it, but I've seen, famous tennis players play. I think if you can show me just how to swing the racket and connect, that might be itself like the thing that makes me more passionate to get to the deeper pieces. Like, some people will end up getting passionate wanting to get to the deeper pieces. Some people will try it, they'll say, that was fun, but maybe that's not for me. And I think that kind of easy entry point, even if it doesn't achieve everything, but it keeps it focused enough that it helps people figure out, am I the person to go the whole way, or am I just curious and now I'm going to, churn out and do something else? And I wonder, like, does it feel, because it feels, what I'm hearing from you is that you feel like if you can't give people everything that you want, then you feel like you don't want to give just a little bit. But I think, it's an admirable quality to want to be so of service. But I wonder if it holds you back from being able to give something that doesn't fully achieve what you want, but that can still help people, and in fact helps sort people to be on the longer journey with you, or to say, okay, I got a taste and that's not for me. And so, have you thought about maybe, is there a recalibration of what it means to meet somebody at the starting line here?
Yeah, that's a great thought, actually. I have been thinking and struggling with that kind of a format where you have a hybrid model where there's this public-facing model, and there are instances where, for example, there was a child who came out who was faced with an acute life-threatening disease, and so you put everything into it, and you put the person in touch with somebody who could be of help. If all the people you could dial the numbers for and reach out, that's the public face. That could come out of a session, or it could come out of contact, and that's what takes away time. And again, like Mishti was saying, as to where the negative carry and all the time. So you say, in the end, you say, even if you put up a barrier, that same, 0 to 1, where, okay, that there is clearly a need for this. And now do you want to scale up by putting up a very small gate on the public forum where you put up a very small gate, you have large numbers of people attending, put up a small gate, on a weekend session?
Mm-hmm.
Or because I don't know really whether people are attuned to looking at the Google Baba or the Google Guru. And so you'll be very happy to look at something that is a television show or something, but when it comes down to putting that first dollar, that just scare away everybody. Mm-hmm. That's the one challenge, right? So you either keep it free or keep the gates really low so that people feel, feel the,
But what about, I feel like you should keep the open ones free and then figure out what the deep paid thing should be and then like charge a premium for that so that the people who really care can show that they really care. And the people who, like if they're the kind of person who would either come for free or like they wouldn't want to pay $10 for an hour or two, then just leave it free because it increases your audience and you don't know what kind of connections will come. Maybe someone shows up and this has happened, right? Like people show up and they're like, oh, my uncle is the director of this institute and why don't you talk to him, kind of stuff. Like that's also of benefit to you.
Yeah, we've had those instances where we've had connected with really good folks. And on the second point, it's strange that even people themselves who are afflicted with the bulge and other, statins or whatever else, diabetes, they would say, you know what, I want to sign up for a session. So the transaction part of it comes in, right? I'm fine with the transaction, but not at the cost of saying something that's not right. So the transaction becomes this. This is a person speaking, saying, well, what am I promised? Am I promised X pounds in X weeks, Y weeks? Makes no sense, right? And so the answer is that you don't promise anything. And I don't know what you tag on to that thing where it requires extreme discipline on the other part as well. And that's why maybe doing it in a format where it's not just one person, but a group of people who sort of, it's not like Weight Watchers, but
like mutual accountability.
There's a mutual, you say, well, it spurs you to act and there is some, back and forth. So maybe that is glue. And as it relates to a transaction point of it, it still has to be authentic because if it's not, then I'm not interested. Maybe you will get something in terms of, doing or making, building things in your kitchen and working, maybe doing simple recipes or whatever. And again, it's not trying to create a recipe book because the reality is that you can go to the New York Times or whatever else and do all these recipes in the world. But it's trying to put that small template of things that can have massive impact. And so it may be a long haul, but that's the way I'm thinking about it.
Right. Yeah. It does seem like there's maybe a possibility to help people with the accountability side of this without necessarily over-promising a specific result, because I think the specific results are going to depend on the specific goals and the compliance with the techniques and the effectiveness of the techniques. And so instead of sort of promising a certain number of pounds, like you say, maybe the promise is maybe you are even almost like the accountability representative with a certain set of people. And if that works, maybe you can actually help provide other types of accountability. I don't know if there's like a peer-to-peer accountability that could emerge if you can kind of get the ball rolling with that.
Right. And I just put up, we were discussing, I tested out your share. It works seamlessly. And cool. So this is a Slack channel here. This is one of the groups that's currently it's still ongoing. So we, put up all these files from our presentations, and then you have, back and forth. They fill in ongoing feedback forms, and they are polled with certain things. They also are polled as to, you can be a saint on weekdays and then not so good on weekends. And so we go through the whole gamut and, things you can do in the kitchen. So this is where in the paid model where people are doing things which are actually concrete. And, so this is an ongoing session right here. And it talks of yoga, meditation, and we've introduced some of these folks, for example, to a local community farming in Jersey, in a town called Pittstown. They do organic, and the people have signed up. They're getting delivered veggies and other things and meats or whatever else.
But you're sort of seeing it right now, like I feel like this might be. It reminds me of like DK and I talk to people who have newsletters, and they often have like really good free content, and then they have a paid Slack community or something, or they have a paid, place to take deeper dives into something.
Right. So this is where the more detailed stuff comes in, and maybe like what you DK said, this is where the differentiation happens in terms of how deep you dive and you're willing to dive, as to and so that we also have had people in the past. We've had people sometimes anonymously posting the glucose sensor readings. Actually, I am on Libre. Libre is a kind of a glucose sensor sold in the US, also in parts of the world. They've shared their sensor readings with them anonymously, and then we say, well, this person did this, and so they saw this change. And essentially, and here is what you see, the body channel. And so there is this amazing story of a person who actually in the 10th decade of their life, Mishti sent it to me, was weightlifting.
Wow.
So
in the 10th decade.
Yes.
Wow.
And so we've been doing this, but at this point, it's difficult for me to gauge as to where this will end up going. But I do feel that there's a lot of value add, and in terms of data collection through polls, through Google Forms, through sometimes with sensors and people who are more capable of investing in technology or not, but rather than touting certain way, just leave it open. And also in terms of like Slack, for now, as I said, we're not trying to build up technology per se at this point in time. I mean, there are a host of other things. I believe there's Circle, and there are other places where you can have these things put up. But I think at this point, it really is not. It's following that philosophy of a mandala, where you create something and you don't mind if you have to destruct it and create again and pivot and keep changing. So, and I think there is a template that has been formed. And, we can keep expanding that, and rather than invest in trying to modularize it in a specific app where you are sort of then trying to conform to that. And every time you change one single thing, then I'm on the one-man army with the engineers, and it doesn't work. So rather than doing that, I just try and sort of gravitate towards what I can control, which is, trying to connect the dots and speak to the experts. And then we have this session coming up on 30th where we are talking to folks, researchers in Bangalore, and who've talked of their experience in COVID. So keeping that part alive, it's a challenge, to be motivated.
But I think you should, and I know we have to wrap, we're 5 minutes over, but I mean, basically, I think you should just keep churning out and not be like hesitant or afraid of doing more in public, and just having a lot of like more public content, public events, and then keeping this going on the side, because that seems like the most aligning way for everyone involved, and at least gets your like brand and presence out there. And then, as you said, you kind of see what happens from there. But I think you should just keep pushing on that. But you can, once you start brainstorming, like, I don't know, maybe different ways of going deeper and stuff, you can come back and talk to us again.
But I would be naive to say that it is not frustrating at times, because where are you going with it? But the happier part is it was more frustrating when we were doing Ayurkula on the technology end, where you were so tied up in technology as to where you could not even come to the front end.
Right.
So you could focus on where the connecting people, right? So here, the frustration doesn't come from technology. It's all there. And then there's so much new stuff happening. And like Highlighter right here, we could just be doing things on Highlighter. And so without worrying on that, if you are just focused on people and the community part of it, so that's, where a good problem to have. And obviously, I think, I have folks who keep prodding me along on this. But the way I also sometimes get my inspirations by thinking of my tombstone. at least it's I tried. So
yeah. Make your mark and leave the world better than you found it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Cool. That's a great philosophy. I think we can end there because I know we're sort of well over time, but it was fun to chat with you and catch up and hear the latest. I think you were maybe our first official guest back in October when we first had our own platform version.
Sessions. Yeah.
So, that was one part of the bookend, and now, of course, you're many versions of everything to see.
Much further. So thanks for joining us throughout our journey, and we like to look forward to keeping in touch with you during yours.
Absolutely, and the platform looks fantastic. It's sat on some of your sessions in the past. There's great content and good thought process happening over there. So good luck to you guys also, and it was my pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.